Welcome to the FAA's virtual public workshop on the draft environmental assessment for the South Central Florida Metroplex. I'm Michael O'Hara, Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region. Florida is the only state in the country with 4 major international airports: Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Orlando, and Tampa. Palm Beach and St. Pete Clearwater International are also important airports in the national airspace system. In addition, Florida has a significant number of general aviation airports. You get the picture. Florida is one of the busiest states for aviation in the United States. The South Central Florida Metroplex is the FAA's plan to modernize air traffic procedures for 21 airports in the southern half of Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology. While safe, these procedures are less precise and efficient than those based on satellite technology. The satellite-based routes proposed for the Metroplex project will enhance safety and efficiency across the region. Metroplex will benefit passengers by creating more direct routes, decrease congestion at airports and in the air, improve air traffic flows, enhancing safety and efficiency, and reduce complexity and communication for air traffic controllers and pilots, making the system safer. Before we can change procedures, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires us to conduct an environmental assessment to determine the potential impacts of the proposed procedures. One purpose of NEPA is to ensure that proposals, alternatives, and environmental impacts of projects are fully disclosed to the public. That's why we're here today. On May 11th, the FAA posted the Draft Environmental Assessment, or EA, for the Metroplex, and we opened a 60-day public comment period that closes on July 10th. We hope that you will consider submitting comments about the document. On this website, you can click the Comments tab, and it will show you how to submit your comments. It provides email addresses and a physical address where you can send comments after the workshop. Be sure to get your comments in before the July 10th deadline. After the comment period closes, we will review and consider all substantive comments received during the comment period as we develop the environmental determination. We expect to issue the determination by September 30th, 2020. A note about the draft EA. The FAA identified inadvertent errors related to runway designations for Orlando, Tampa, and St. Pete Clearwater International airports. We updated the document on May 13th, and it's posted at metroplexenvironmental.com. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start. First, if you're having technical issues, you can text us anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253 or click the Technical Support tab on this webpage. Second, the workshop will last 90 minutes. We are recording the workshop and it will be posted on this website tomorrow for you to review. You can share the link with friends and neighbors who are unable to participate today. And finally, we have experts available to answer questions about the draft EA and the proposed air traffic control procedures. FAA air traffic controllers, environmental specialists, and industry representatives will answer your questions after the presentation. As a reminder, the questions asked and answers provided here are not part of the official record for the draft EA. To comment for the official record, click on the Comments tab on this website. That will link you to the FAA's official comment page for this project. Now, Lisa Favors, an environmental specialist for the FAA's Air Traffic Organization, will brief us on the draft environmental assessment.
Thank you, Michael. I will explain the draft EA for the South Central Florida Metroplex. As mentioned earlier, we developed the document in accordance with NEPA, which requires us first to identify the purpose and need for the project. In this case, the purpose and need addresses the current inefficient arrival and departure procedures for airports in South Central Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology and are less precise and efficient than satellite procedures. We need to fix that. The draft EA identifies causes for inefficiency as lack of predictable routes or procedures to transition aircraft between airport runways and high altitude en route airspace. Complex interactions between converging routes and lack of flexibility for air traffic controllers as they transition flights between high altitude and low altitude airspace. By adopting new procedures, which the draft EA calls the proposed action, we expect reduced workload due to fewer controller-pilot communications, more efficient operations due to decreased complexity, and fewer flight segments resulting in more predictable traffic flows. A detailed explanation of the purpose and need is included in Chapter 2 of the draft EA. The draft EA analyzes potential environmental impacts from the proposed action and the no action alternative. It is important to note that we analyzed many additional procedures, but they not carried forward for detailed study in the draft EA because they did not meet the purpose and need or applicable safety standards. Under no action, procedures in place from June 2017 to May 2018 would remain planned modifications that are independent of the Metroplex. Our analysis determined that only the proposed action would meet the purpose and need for the project. The no action alternative would not meet the purpose and need, but it was included in the draft EA as required by Council on Environmental Quality Regulations. The alternatives are described in Chapter 3 of the draft EA. Affected environment describes the human, physical, and natural environmental conditions that the proposed action could affect. The affected environment is described in detail in Chapter 4 of the draft EA. The draft EA considers the effects on 14 environmental resource categories and their subcategories identified in FAA guidance. We evaluated the alternatives under conditions forecasted for 2021, the first year the proposed action could be implemented, and under the 2026 forecasted conditions. The evaluation considers the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of the proposed action and no action alternatives. The draft EA determined that neither the proposed action nor the no action alternatives are likely to cause significant environmental impacts to any of the environmental resource categories. For more information, you can review Chapter 5 in the draft EA. The rest of my discussion will focus on the noise analysis since you, the public, expressed most interest in that. However, feel free to ask questions about any category during the Q&A session later in the workshop. First, I will explain how we measure noise. The FAA measures aviation noise using the day-night average sound level, DNL, metric. DNL represents noise as it occurs over a 24-hour period, with nighttime noise weighted more heavily than daytime noise. DNL is the standard noise metric used for studies of aviation noise exposure in communities. To account for differences in how people respond to noise, we use the A-weighted scale, DBA. This scale closely approximates the volume of sound as perceived by the human ear. The FAA considers aircraft noise exposure of 65 dNL in residential areas and noise increases of dNL 1.5 dB or more for noise-sensitive areas exposed to noise at or above the dNL 65 dB noise exposure level to be significant. The noise analysis demonstrates that the proposed action would not result in significant noise increases. More information about how the FAA measures noise is in Appendix E of the draft EA, and a detailed noise analysis can be found in Appendix I. Before I end, the following video will show you how to look up noise information for your address. You may search more than 122,000 grid points of noise data in the study area, presented in decibels, abbreviated as dB. The grid points are U.S. Census population points located at 1/2 nautical mile intervals across the entire study area. The map opens to the study area. In the search bar, start typing your address and similar addresses will pop up. Click on the correct address and you will see a light blue map pin. The map shows the model grid points in blue. Click on each point to see a pop-up with noise analysis results. The map shows data including DNL calculated for the alternatives and the change in noise when the proposed action is compared to the no action alternative. Now our air traffic control expert will brief you on some of the more significant procedures the Metroplex proposes for your area.
I'm an air traffic controller who works for the FAA's Miami Air Traffic Control Tower and Approach Control. In this section of the website, we will walk you through the flight procedures, poster boards for Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International Airport, and Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport. Each of these boards shows a sampling of existing flight tracks and the proposed new flight procedures for jet aircraft. Any single board will show either arrival or departure tracks and procedures. They are all overlaid on the street map of the area surrounding the airports. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of the airport and the names of the flight procedures are in the box on the upper right corner. This box also shows the type of operation, either arrival or departure, and the direction of flight, which we call flow, either north, south, east, or west. Flow is related to the layout of the airport's runways, and it indicates which direction the aircraft is facing when it lands or takes off from the airport's runway. A few acronyms are used in the boards. A standard instrument departure, or SID, is a departure. A standard terminal arrival, or STAR, is an arrival. Air navigation, or RNAV, is the term for modern satellite-based navigation technology used in the proposed procedures. The spelling of each arrival or departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the SNAPR departure is pronounced snapper. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that the aircraft fly to. Just as with the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the CLPSO waypoint will be pronounced Calypso. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. This color path shows the intended flight path in the future for most flight using the new procedures. Surrounding the path are dispersed path areas, in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly in the future and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. The existing flight tracks are shown on the legend by color, starting from the lowest altitudes in pink, then blue, teal, and finally the highest altitudes are in green. The flight tracks shown are a just sample of jet aircraft flights which occur from March to April 2018 during the daytime, which does not include nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. Next, we'll take a look at a few arrival and departure boards for these airports. This flight procedure board for jet aircraft at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport is for east flow departures. This is the most common direction of air traffic flow at Fort Lauderdale International. There are 9 proposed departure procedures that will be used when the airport is in an east flow, which means airplanes are taking off towards the east over water and arriving over the land from the west heading east. This is the most common direction of air traffic flow at Fort Lauderdale International Airport. In an east flow, there are 8 departures to the west, east, and north called Reggae, Snapper, Felix, Harps, Vacay, Twister, Bongos, and Glades. For airplanes with destinations to the south, there's only one departure set called Mojito. Airplanes taking off and fly east, then turn to the southeast on the Reggae or Snapper procedure. Turn to the northeast on the Felix departure, or to the north on the Arps, Vacay, Bongos, Twister, and Glades departure. Aircraft with destination to the west use the Bongos procedure. This board also shows the jet departure procedures for Miami International Airport, which turn north and fly near the Fort Lauderdale area. Aircraft from Miami using the Twister and Arps procedures will initially depart navigating along the procedure and then will be given a heading to follow, called a vector, by the air traffic controller. These are shown in a lighter shade of purple and labeled with small arrows. After departure, an air traffic controller can give a pilot a heading to follow, called a vector, that will guide them out of the Fort Lauderdale area. This flight procedure board is for jet aircraft departures of Fort Lauderdale International Airport on a west flow. There are 9 proposed departure procedures that will be used when the airport is on a west flow, which means airplanes are taking off towards the west over land and arriving over the ocean from the east heading west. This is the less common direction flow of traffic at Fort Lauderdale International Airport. There are 7 departures used for west, east, and north destination, called Reggae, Snapper, Felix, Arps, Twister, Vacay, and Bongos. For airplanes with destinations to the south, there are 2 departure procedures called Mojito and Glade departures. Airplanes flying to the east make a turn to the north and east using the Reggae, Snapper, Felix departure procedures. Aircraft with destinations to the north use the Arps, Vacay, or Twister departure procedures. The Arps procedure is also used by Miami International Airport, which are shown on the light purple lines. West flow departures from Miami join the Arps departure procedure near Boca Raton. The Twister is also used by Miami. Aircraft from Miami merge onto the Twister departure near the South Florida Wildlife Management Area. This flight procedure board is for jet aircraft arrivals at Fort Lauderdale International Airport on an east flow. There are 4 proposed arrivals that will be used when the airport is on an east flow. There are 2 runways oriented east to west. Aircraft coming from the west, north, and northwest typically land on the north runway, which is runway 10 left. These arrivals would use the CUDA, Tiki, and OLAS procedures. Aircraft coming from the south, southeast, and east land on the south runway, which is runway 10 right, and will use the Bahia arrival. However, air traffic controllers may assign alternate runways for operational needs. This flight procedure board is for jet aircraft arrivals at Fort Lauderdale International Airport on a west flow. There are 4 proposed arrival procedures that will be used when the airport is on a west flow. Aircraft coming from the west, north, and northwest typically land on the north runway, which is runway 28 right. These arrivals will use the CUDA, Tiki, and Bahia arrivals. Aircraft coming from the south, southeast, and east land on the south runway, which is runway 28 left, and will use the OLAS arrival. This flight procedure board for Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport shows the departure and arrival procedures for east flow, which, as previously noted, is the most common direction of air traffic at Fort Lauderdale. This board shows all the arrival and departure procedures used when the airport is on an east flow. There are 9 proposed departure procedures shown in purple and 4 proposed arrival procedures shown in orange that will be used in an east flow, which is the aircraft taking off to the east over the ocean and arriving over the land. There are 2 departure procedures shown in light purple that are also used by Miami International Airport for destinations to the north and west, which are the ARPS and the Twister procedures. This flight procedure board for Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport shows the departure and arrival procedures for west flow, which is the less common direction of air traffic at this airport. This board shows all the arrival and departure procedures used when the airport is on a west flow. There are 9 proposed departure procedures shown in purple and 4 proposed arrival procedures shown in orange that will be used in west flow, which is aircraft taking off to the west over the land and arriving over the ocean. There are 2 departure procedures shown in light purple that are also used by Miami International Airport for destinations to the north and west, the ARPS and the Twister procedures.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Michael O'Hara, the Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region. I want to welcome everyone to the workshop Q&A session for Fort Lauderdale this afternoon. I'm joined by several technical experts, including Luis and Rick, air traffic controllers from the Miami Airport Traffic Control Tower and the Radar Approach Control, as well as Lisa Favors, FAA Environmental Specialist, several others from the FAA, and we have airport and airline industry representatives as well. Luis and Kingsley are also available to help with any needed Spanish translation if that is preferable. As a reminder, we're holding this workshop to answer your questions this afternoon about the Metroplex project in South Central Florida. We're unable to answer questions about other topics in this workshop, and we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, or you can text your question to us at 949-478-0253. Again, the text number is 949-478-0253. If you need any technical assistance during the workshop, please click on the technical support tab on the website. So I want to thank everybody, and I'll turn it over to Luis for a moment.
Recuerden que pueden someter sus preguntas en español vía redes sociales como Facebook, YouTube o enviarnos un texto al número 949-478-0253.
All right, thank you. We'll move into our first question. What is the South Central Florida Metroplex? Okay, the South Central Florida Metroplex is a comprehensive proposal to improve the flow of traffic into and out of 21 airports in Florida by making procedures in the airspace safer and more efficient. So the project proposes to add new, more efficient satellite-based procedures and several conventional procedures based on radar and other ground-based nav aids. And the initiative will focus on 4 major international airports where operations have a direct effect throughout the national airspace system. And those include Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International, as well as Miami International, Orlando International, Tampa International, St. Pete Clearwater International, Palm Beach International, and 15 smaller reliever and satellite airports. A very broad project across the southern part of Florida. We'll move to the next question. Will the new procedures increase the noise generated from aircraft? Lisa, I'd like to ask for you to help with that one.
Sure, Michael. The FAA's environmental analysis for the project looked at more than 210,000 US Census data blocks from the year 2010. Within those areas, it determined that modeled noise levels at more than 117,000 points. And it showed that the proposed procedures would not result in any significant or reportable noise increases under FAA criteria. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Okay, we have another one here. What is a Part 150 study? And there may be a related question about why can't the FAA combine the Part 150 study and the South Central Florida Metroplex? So I may take a shot at that. I'll welcome any other feedback, but a Part 150, when you hear a term like that, that actually refers to a part of the Code of Federal Regulations. FAA regulations is 14 CFR Part 150. That provides the framework for airport noise compatibility planning. So a Part 150 study enables airports to identify neighboring areas that aircraft noise affects and then develop measures to mitigate the noise. Preparing a Part 150 study is voluntary, but participating in the program allows an airport operator to apply for federal grants for noise mitigation projects where they may qualify for that. In terms of Part 150 versus the Metroplex, they really are two separate processes. Airport operators, as I mentioned, conduct the Part 150 study. That looks at current and future, I think it's 5-year levels for noise exposure around the airport, and then they develop mitigation measures. The Metroplex is an initiative to develop new, safer, more efficient air traffic procedures that'll undergo an environmental review like we're briefing on today before they would be implemented. So hopefully that's helpful. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that from the panel? Okay, we'll continue. Remember that today's workshop is for the FAA's Metroplex project, so we're not going to go into other topics or projects. Please use the Zoom Q&A button, social media, YouTube, Facebook links that are there to submit questions, or you can text us a question directly at 949-478-0253. All right, we have another question here. In this one, the person says, you're well aware of the noise issue caused by the opening of the South Runway in 2014, which has resulted in horrendous noise issues for Broward residents, especially in the southwest area of Fort Lauderdale and Southeast Plantation. During your Metroplex workshops last April, you received numerous comments requesting that you move the waypoints for westbound departures further west, so those departures would head over industrial areas as they used to. A slight change in waypoints like this will make the noise situation vastly improved for these residents. Why did you ignore all the comments from last year requesting this waypoint change? Right, so I would ask air traffic, can you help with that one, Rick?
Sure, I'll take that question, Michael, thanks. These comments were taken into consideration and the waypoints were moved farther to the west. Unfortunately, I think these boards don't depict it as well as the Google Earth pictures do from the EA. If you want to bring up the zoomed in version of the Fort Lauderdale West departure board, you'll see that the DREADS waypoint was designed to stay south of 595, and also that aircraft would initially fly to the west before even turning to the DREADS waypoint. And the reason for that design was to stay more over commercial areas as opposed to heavily residential areas to the north of 595.
And Michael, Jim here, if I could weigh in for just a second.
Yes.
You know, the challenges in moving those waypoints in the immediate vicinity of the airport when aircraft are flying low and we know that the surrounding communities are impacted. So we need to be very careful about just moving noise. As, you know, just none of us would like to have somebody else's noise moved into my backyard. So, you know, that's something that we're very careful about. If we can accommodate requests, as in this case, then, you know, we're amenable to doing that.
All right, Jim, thank you. So there were a couple of points that come to mind on that one for me. We referenced, Rick referenced the Google Earth picture. So if you go to metroplexenvironmental.com, that's where you can link to the environmental assessment, the draft EA for this project. And some of the documents you can download include Google Earth images that let you zoom into street level if you're looking for that level of detail. I think that's what Rick was mentioning. It shows a little more precise or zoomed in view for an area you may be interested in than the more overview boards that you see here. The other point I want to mention is when we talk about comments, the information that we discuss, the Q&A and the materials we cover today in the workshop are not officially part of the record for the environmental assessment. So I want to encourage you, if you have comments, we want you to submit those to us. You can go to floridametroplexworkshops.com and you'll find a link for the comments tab, and you can submit those to the FAA. Those will become part of the record for the final environmental determination, and you'll see a response from the agency on any comments that come in through that formal channel. But again, the dialogue that we have today is meant to be informative and exchange information and for us to receive questions from you all. But I want to make sure people know about submitting through the comments.
Hey, Michael, this is Winston from the Aviation Department.
Yes, Winston.
I would just like to add also that, you know, that the Aviation Department did submit comments to the FAA requesting that the FAA consider during this project these ELSO type or ELSO-like procedures, which are, you know, will help to reduce the divergent headings both to the east and to the west of FLL, as long as that's done safely. So I just wanted to bring that to light, that the Aviation Department did submit that type of information to the FAA. Thank you.
Very good, Winston. Thank you. That underscores, not to just, I want to get back to the questions, but that underscores the relationship that we have with the airport and the industry on projects like this, because there are perspectives that the airport has about communities near the airport, and industry works with us as well to ensure that any procedures that are designed are flyable and they take into account operational aspects important there. So again, let me get back to the questions, but thanks everyone for the dialogue on that one. We have another question. One question of interest to the communities west of Fort Lauderdale. What are the estimated minimums for aircraft on final landing to the east? Just looking for an estimate. Rick?
Hey, Michael, so from an air traffic standpoint, I don't see any changes. They'll intercept the glide slope as they do today. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything that they would like to say based on their expertise.
Right, and Michael, I don't know if we're talking about landing minimums, which of course is a very pilot-centric issue, but I know for the ILS, straight-in ILS, the weather minimums are 200-foot ceiling, 3/4 of a mile visibility. So for somebody who's, you know, just a layman out there, what that means to you is that if the landing environment is not in sight by the time the pilot reaches that point, 200-foot ceiling, 3/4 of a mile from the runway, that he has to reject the landing. Gary McMullen, did you want to add anything to that?
I can add a little bit. The minimums aren't changing. It's 200 feet above the ground minimums, and we can land as low as 1,800 feet of visibility. So those minimums will not be changing.
All right, Jim, Gary, thank you. Anybody else have anything to add to that question? Or that answer, I should say. Okay, we'll continue. The worst of the aircraft noise experienced by residents near Fort Lauderdale is during the first 60 seconds of takeoff. Yet your diagrams for new departure patterns are at such a scale that it is impossible for anyone to see the exact headings of departing aircraft during that important first minute of flight. Why haven't you provided close-in detailed diagrams of the departure so that residents can clearly see what will occur during the first 60 seconds when they are most affected by aircraft noise? Jim, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or.
There we go. So that seems like that's a question that about the display, obviously. And we did the display boards so that they were similar to the ones that we used in last year's workshops. So, they would be familiar to people who had attended there. The draft EA uses Google Earth pictures and maps that can show the zoomed in view all the way down to the street level and get the best picture of the new proposed procedure. So if you want to go to metroplexenvironmental.com, the full EA is on there. There is a Google Earth capability in there, and I think you can get a pretty good view of what we're doing.
Great point, Jim. And I think we've reiterated that a couple times. If you want that level of detail, it's available, and that's the best way to zoom into that level of detail. All right, great. All right, we have another question. During this virtual workshop, why can't you show the questions you're receiving on the screen? I can say generally, we're receiving questions from many different platforms. They're coming in from Zoom, they're coming in from Facebook and YouTube. We're reading those exactly as they come in, I believe, and we'll feed the questions, or those questions are fed to us as a panel. So we're working through those, and hopefully you'll find that. I'm sure many of you have seen your questions answered and addressed already. We're going to do our best to continue working through and answer as many as we can in this workshop. And if necessary, we have 2 other workshops for Fort Lauderdale coming up. One's tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and the other is Thursday, June 11th at 6 p.m. So we'll just continue working through the questions here. At the Metroplex workshops in April of 2019, attendees submitted comment forms. Were these comment forms tabulated and the results provided to the public? Is anybody on the—
Michael, I'd be happy to weigh in on that. The previous workshops, those were not for the official record of the environmental analysis, so they won't be included in the final environmental analysis. However, we did retain them, and we did consider all of the comments that we received in the workshops. However, we do not respond back to individuals on what we did with their comments. And the good thing about when we do the final environmental assessment, that all of the comments we receive from this draft environmental workshop, those will be included in the appendices in the final environmental assessment, and then they can be reviewed then by whoever the submitter was.
Okay, so Jim, I'll just add to what you're saying. Everything that we're doing meet or exceeds the requirements that we have under the National Environmental Policy Act. Lisa may want to nod if in concurrence that how we handle those comments is appropriate. I actually do have information. We had 17 workshops in 2019, and in Fort Lauderdale, I believe we had 220 attendees over 4 workshops. We had 73 comments that were submitted in the workshop, and about 535 total that came in from the Fort Lauderdale area. And overall, from those 17 workshops last year, there were 1,007 comments. So hopefully that provides, I suppose in this case, we're providing that information to the public, but as Jim said, there's not a requirement to respond to those. What we do is factor those into the designs that were studied during the environmental assessment. All right. We have a question here. We believe the public was informed that comments would be considered but not replied to. All right, I think we've got that, right? So we didn't reply to those directly. They were all documented and used in the design changes. So pardon me on that. We have another question. All right, this is a long one. Congress passed the FAA reauthorization of 2018 in October of 2018. Section 175 of the reauthorization requires the FAA to consider using diverging departure flight paths or lateral spacing to address community noise concerns when proposing or adjusting departure procedures if requested by the airport operator and community leaders. In Appendix A of your assessment, you publish a letter you received from Mr. Michael Pacito, Director of Planning for the Broward County Aviation Department. This letter specifically requests that you reduce the 15-degree heading separation for departures at Fort Lauderdale. Why haven't you complied with Section 175 and considered Mr. Pacito's request?
I'll jump on that one, Michael.
All right, thanks, Jim.
That's a really good question, because Section 1, we receive our guidance on our authorization from Congress, and of course the agency complies with that guidance. We did in fact incorporate reduced divergence on the departure procedures to the west. So there's 11 degrees of divergence in there. The challenge here is it's not like at Atlanta where you have 5 runways and you have multiple paths straight out or turning left and turning right. So we're pretty well constrained by the existing traffic flows. We did, by moving the Dreads waypoint and other waypoints to the west, we did achieve the reduced divergence. And I think you'll see that for some communities, there was a definite benefit to it, but we're not going to be creating multiple additional departure paths as this refers to. And then, I don't know, Lisa, if you have anything to say about any of those additional Section 175 requirements? So I know.
No, I don't have anything to add. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I know there were some things in there about doing analysis on environmental impacts of noise and emissions on health and sleep and those kinds of things like that. I know we're involved in some other analysis efforts in the agency.
Yes, and actually there is a lot of information on those, all of those studies and analysis that have taken place. You can find those specifically on the FAA's website if you go to faa.gov. And then if you search environment and energy, I think that is the location where you can find those additional studies if you want that additional information. And certainly in the environmental document, you can see all the points that we analyzed in the document. Okay.
All right, Lisa, Jim, thank you. We have another question. Can someone run us through how the DNL measurement system was structured and created?
I can give it.
Lisa?
I can give it a shot.
Okay.
All right. Well, the DNL has widely been accepted as the best method to describe aircraft noise exposure, and is the noise detector required by the FAA to use in aviation noise exposure analysis and noise compatibility planning. The DNL has always has also been identified by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. EPA, as the principal metric for airport noise analysis. Now, specifically, DNL is the day-night average sound level, and it's over a 24-hour equivalent sound level metric. DNL is expressed as an average noise level over on the basis of annual aircraft operation over a calendar year. So if you think about the entire calendar year, we take that 24-hour equivalent across the entire year, and it's the average that we use in all of our analysis. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, and I think that was a good segue from the last question, the Section 175, because Section 175 also has a requirement for the agency to assess alternative noise metrics to that DNL standard. And that's something that the agency is in the process of doing right now. we hear that question from communities a lot. Why don't you use a different noise metric? So good question.
All right, thanks, Jim and Lisa. All right, we have another question. I've heard that arrivals to the north runway are lower over those communities, I guess, over those communities than the approaches to the south runway. Why is that, and will this project help us?
I'll take this one, Michael. Even with Metroplex procedures, the same situation will continue to happen. Traffic on the north side of the airport, depending on weather conditions or the amount of traffic landing at Fort Lauderdale, that will usually be descended to 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet in order to stay below the traffic on the south runway final. And this is to accommodate to the rule of maintaining 1,000 feet or 3 miles separation between the two until they're both established on the final. So with the new procedures of Metroplex, the same conditions will stay.
Okay, thanks, Luis. All right, so no real changes with these procedures. Is that? All right, we'll continue. This is actually a question we received during a few previous workshops. When are airports going to see more airplanes like before COVID happened? All right, so we can generally share the FAA's role is to provide the safe and efficient separation of air traffic, separating aircraft throughout the national airspace system and responding to the needs of the aviation industry and the flying public. So we maintain in close contact, as I said earlier in the workshop, with industry on a more than daily basis about what those needs look like. It could be everything from weather to crisis like the current COVID. I can tell you that we're confident that flights will return because of the direct correlation between aviation and the economy in Florida. We're already seeing in the news reports about some recovery across the airlines. I don't know if any of our industry partners have anything specific to add.
Michael, this is Mark. I can take that. Mark Hopkins from Delta. So what the system in South Florida will see through August is an incremental increase in flights at all the airports that we're talking about here. It's very slow, but as the customer demand increases, we're adding flights into those markets. So it is happening. To confirm what you said about the media reports. The process has begun of moving airplanes out of storage and having them return to service. And incrementally, you'll see those increases. It won't be a light switch. It'll be a very slow process of flights coming back into those cities and across the system. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Lee, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'll just add on to what Mark has presented that, what we're trying to look at, I think, across the board is the health and safety of our customers and our crew members. So we're going to be taking a lot of different things into account in terms of making sure that we're following all of the correct guidelines, providing an environment for the customers so that they can feel comfortable and safe, both as they get on the aircraft, during their flights, and then once they get to their destinations. So we're going to continue to work with the airports, with Broward County to help folks understand how to social distance and how to basically operate in this new normal. But as Mark said, we're going to be looking at lots of different information in terms of bringing additional flights back and making sure that that everybody is comfortable as they as the demand and the flights return. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, we'll continue. Can you explain how the westbound traffic will utilize the different new flight paths? That's probably one we want to pull the.
Yeah, I can take this one, Michael. If we can pull up the West Flow Departure Board. So today we use headings when the aircraft depart off Fort Lauderdale, and we have to use 15 degrees of separation. Also, with the headings, depending on aircraft characteristic and also wind, it determines when the airplane, once they depart and elevate from the runway, where they're actually going to turn. With these Metroplex procedures, we're using satellite-based technology, which will allow the aircraft to go point to point. So the way we've designed our west flow departures here is one procedure that, well, actually multiple procedures, but basically one path that goes basically due westbound and another path that will go to the northwest. And with this satellite-based technology, we can now use the 11 degrees of divergence, which allows us to design that northwest heading to stay in more industrial areas as opposed to residential areas, which is happening today because the aircraft are starting either the turn to the 290 heading a little bit earlier because they were able to elevate off the runway quicker, or because the wind is drifting in the north.
Thank you, Rick.
Hey, Michael, if we could keep this picture up, this is also, I think, a perfect example of some of the limitations of what we can do with dispersal. So dispersal isn't just creating multiple departure headings out of the airport. It's also how air traffic is going to be able to use the tools that they're given. So here they essentially have 2 departure paths off the runway, and air traffic is going to be limited in what they can do. They have different separation requirements, for these 2 scenarios here. So if they're going to go the same path, they're going to keep them 3 miles apart. They're going to launch them 3 apart. If he's going to use that diverging path, then he can anticipate that separation based on that, airborne, and you can anticipate that within 2 miles, that airplane is going to be able to turn. So sometimes it's how the tower is queuing airplanes up. We can launch, straight out, launch one to the northwest, launch straight out, launch one to the northwest. That's dispersing the departures too, as opposed to continuously launching one in one direction, all day long. So it's a challenge, and this is a great picture that shows how there are limitations here at Fort Lauderdale.
All right, great. Thanks, Jim and Rick. On the previous noise issue and response, am I correct that the data used was collected in 2010? That would underrepresent the current noise levels. Lisa, maybe you can clarify that. I think you could help with that one. All right. Looks like you're muted, Lisa. And if we can have the back room unmute Lisa, that may help. All right. So we're not ignoring the question.
Can you hear me now, Michael?
Yes.
Okay. I'm frozen. I don't know why. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go
okay.
ahead,
Can you repeat the question, please? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
On the previous noise issue and response, I think they heard us say something. Am I correct that the data used was collected in 2010? That would underrepresent the current noise levels.
Yes, the draft EA utilized 2010 census block data, not noise data from 2010. The track data used in this analysis was from June 2017 through May 2018. It was used in this analysis. And I guess I would say it pulled more than 1 million radar flight tracks that were evaluated in the noise model. That was the input that was used. Thanks for letting us clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And of course, 2010 would be the latest census data available. All right.
That's correct.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, we have another question. The average of aircraft noise does not consider extreme noise by non-compliant aircraft grandfathered for continued flight under the FAA rules. These older aircraft are far noisier to residents than average aircraft compliant today. What are the plans to discontinue non-compliant grandfathered aircraft from the 1930s? For example, the combination passenger and freight operations, formerly called 5-Star out of Fort Lauderdale Executive. These aircraft do not fit the proposals presented here today due to airspeed and climb capabilities. Okay, that sort of touches Metroplex. I don't know if we have anybody who wants to touch on older aircraft.
So, Michael, I'm going to guess that that operation is not a jet or a turbojet operation. If we're going back that far back, that way far back into the 30s. So the procedures that are developed underneath the Metroplex are for jet and turbojet aircraft. So, Caesar, you were nodding your head. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, not really. Obviously, most of the, I mean, Gary and Lee and everybody, I'm here representing also the ALPA, which is all 121 carriers. There is really none of us using those aircraft nowadays. There are some few, like he was saying, 5-Star out of Executive. I've seen a DC-3 and a Beech 18 come in and out of there on cargo operations going to the Bahamas a few times. But frankly, it's really not part of our group.
So if they're not flying these procedures, then our analysis doesn't include that operation. I think that's probably separate from this. It's not like the new procedures associated with the South Central Florida Metroplex project will incorporate aircraft that aren't flying procedures today.
Yeah, Michael, I would say that more than likely this aircraft, the Metroplex is not going to apply to any of those operations.
So there is some information out on the FAA website. If you go to FAA.gov, search for the term noise, there's information there in general about research that's being done in aircraft, but we'll probably leave it at that for this session. We have a question. Why is Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International updating its Part 150 study? Okay, so I'm familiar a little bit with that. Winston, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that. So I know the Broward County Aviation Department identified several proposed noise mitigation measures that were part of the EIS, part of the expansion for 9 right 27 left, and that noise mitigation program's ongoing. I know go ahead, Winston.
Yeah, I was going to say the mitigation program is separate from the Part 150. It's the mitigation was done, as you mentioned, for the EIS. You know, one of the stipulations through the EIS that was conducted for the South Runway was that we would conduct a Part 150 study 1 year after the runway is fully occupied and operational, and that's what we have done. So since the runway has been fully operational, we have undertaken a Part 150 land use compatibility study.
Okay, great. Thanks, Winston. So I guess there's a related question. What happens if the air traffic procedures developed by the South Central Florida Metroplex change the noise contours? And I guess what I would say, Winston, you may have an opinion on that, but I don't think we're expecting the noise exposure maps to have any significant change based on our environmental analysis, but those could be updated if as the Metroplex procedures are finalized. What's your take on that?
Yes, I think after the Metroplex is done and I guess implementation is completed, I guess we'll look at how changes are affected for the environs for Fort Lauderdale International Airport, and I guess at that point, and it also depends on when it's done. It maybe be within that window for our Part 150 to be updated again, because the Part 150 is done every 5 years. So it may be within that window for a Part 150 to be completed for the airport, and at that time we'll take an assessment of the flight tracks and what the Metroplex implemented, and to see how it affects the airspace.
Okay. All right, I don't see Lisa on camera, but I'll just take the opportunity to share again that the draft environmental assessment didn't find any significant noise impacts from the changes that are recommended or proposed as part of the Metroplex project.
That was very good, Michael. I'm sorry, I'm just getting back on. My internet keeps dropping. If you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear the question, but what you just said was very accurate. That is correct. Thank you.
Winston and Lisa, thank you both. All right, we're seeing a lot of folks on Zoom and social media. Keep your questions coming. You can text us a question at 949-478-0253 or use the Zoom Q&A button if you're on Zoom. Here's another question. Why isn't the FAA holding public meetings on the Metroplex? I would say that this actually is a public workshop. It's virtual so that we can share information and hopefully replicate the experience that we do with an in-person workshop along the lines of what we did last year. We're not holding those in person right now because of public health recommendations regarding social distancing, advising against large gatherings of people. And some of the venues that we typically use for workshops like this remain closed or maybe were closed in recent weeks due to some of those concerns. I mentioned some of the statistics. Last year we had 17 workshops, 729 attendees. This is our 5th virtual workshop within the last week, and we've been reaching, having literally 10,000 views or more in a lot of those workshops around the state. So we're pleased with the participation. We hope that this format allows us to receive questions that you all have and to provide responses. We have the experts here to meet with you this afternoon and later this week. Again, I mentioned we're doing another workshop for Fort Lauderdale tomorrow, June 10th at 3 o'clock and Thursday, June 11th at 6 o'clock. So again, trying different times of day to be as accommodating as possible. The workshop's also being recorded today. So if people can't make any of the live workshops, they can watch it after the fact. Share the link with friends and neighbors. And ultimately, we're hoping that you'll provide comments back to the FAA, your thoughts on the proposals that are in the project. I'm going to continue, get back to the questions. There are a lot of airplanes over the Everglades. Did we study the environmental impacts? Okay. Lisa, that's probably in your area.
Yes, it is. Yes, short answer to that question is yes, we studied the environmental impacts over the Everglades. The draft environmental document considered all indirect, direct, and cumulative effects over the Everglades. And that's a requirement as required by the Council on Environmental Quality Regulations and NEPA. So you can find more information about what came out of that study or that analysis in our environmental document. Again, if you go to Florida Metroplex Environmental, you will be able to see all that documentation. I think it's should be in section 4 and 5 of the document. Thank you, Michael.
Just a quick note, metroplexenvironmental.com.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I just don't want people poking at the wrong website. So metroplexenvironmental.com will get you to the draft EA. And
that is correct.
As Lisa said, those areas were studied, and all the environmental areas studied, none of those had a significant impact identified in the draft EA. So you're welcome to look at the sections that Lisa referenced. I'm just giving you the Cliff Notes version there. So is there anything from an air traffic perspective about proposed changes and any impacts on Everglades routes? Rick or Luis, anything come to mind on that? Or
we do have a new route, it's called the Glades, that will be going out to the west over the Everglades, but we estimate the aircraft to be 7,000 and above in that area, where I don't believe it should be a factor.
Okay, Luis, thanks. All right, here's a question. It looks like all westbound departures are going to concentrate over one community with the Dreads waypoint. Can't you share the departures over a number of different paths? Feels like we've talked a little bit about that. I don't know, Luis or
Yeah, we have talked about it, Michael. If you want to bring up the West departure board for Fort Lauderdale, you'll see actually that not all the airplanes are going to be going to dreads. There's basically a northwest path and a due westbound path. Now, what we're utilizing is technology that exists today with current aircraft, and we're able to do a RNAV off the ground. So basically, the aircraft will depart and go direct to the waypoints. Now, with the dreads waypoint, we were able to keep it south of 595, where it's more industrial area, and keep it away from the communities that are north of the 595 highway.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, we have a question. Can you show me that noise tool again? How did the draft EA determine aircraft noise? I live by Holiday Park. Sorry, Holiday Park. Anyway, Lisa, if you could help with that.
I can certainly show you the tool. Again, when you came to the workshop, you went to Florida Metroplex workshops.com. Once you get to that site, it like the fifth button over, you will see a noise tool. If you click on that, it brings you to this page that you see on the screen now. This is a noise mapping tool that we use to demonstrate, or so that you can see the noise data collected. On this page, it will walk you through what you'll actually see. You'll see the proposed action. You'll see the change in noise. You can look at the DNL from the proposed action, the no action alternative, and the change in the DNL for specific locations. So for your location that you asked for, once you get to that tool, in the top left-hand corner, the search bar there, you can start typing an address, and hopefully we have an address that's close to your area. There we are. It'll start populating some similar addresses. You can just click on one that is your address, and it'll bring you directly to the map, and you'll see a little map pin at your address. Now, the little round dots and the circles around that address are that's the census tract data that we collected, and we have you can click on that, and it will give you just that information: the proposed action DNL for year 2021 and 2026 forecasted years. You can see it for the proposed action, the no action, and then you can also look at the change in noise for your area. Now, this tool is available now on our website. It'll be available after the workshop so that you can take some time and search. You might be interested in a school location or your location or a church. You can always go there and get that information. And maybe that covers it.
That's great. That's great, Lisa.
Okay.
One thing,
Great.
I know we talk about proposed action and no action, but if I use different terms for that, that's what you'll find in the document. But think of that as we implement the South Central Florida Metroplex, or we keep things the way they are. And the difference in between those is what we're showing. So
Thanks for that clarity, Michael. You're absolutely right.
I know sometimes we use terms and they may not be clear to everybody, but I'm just explaining it because that's the terminology we use throughout the document. Thanks, Lisa. We'll keep moving. I live in the Harbor Beach area and see morning takeoffs increasing over our area heading northeast. Why don't the planes just fly direct east over the port? You may want to, we have some procedure board we could pull up for that. Luis, did you want to help with that?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Michael. If you can show the East Flow departure board. So the plan is in the future, the proposed procedures are going to be RNAV up the ground, as Ricky mentioned on the West Flow. It's the same thing to the east. It's RNAV up the ground. They fly up the ground to a fix, stay on that procedure, and it's going to be a more predictable route. Current day, they're being turn radar vectors by the controller, so it makes it very unpredictable where they're turning. And obviously this is going to be depending on weather condition and safety issues.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thanks, Luis. So just a note to everybody, we're going to continue taking new questions until 1:30, and we'll continue to answer the questions we have received from Zoom, from text. You can text us at 949-478-0253 and social media. So here's the next question. How will this affect IFR flights to and from Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale Executive, or Miami Opelika, and the other airports in the area?
I guess I can take that one, Michael. It shouldn't have a big impact on these satellite airports. Now, for Fort Lauderdale Executive and for Opelika, we were able to design a standard instrument departure procedure for those airports, in which they'll actually have an independent flow outside of our airspace, which should help increase the efficiency of not only those satellite airports, but also of Miami and Fort Lauderdale as well, because they don't have to share, at least initially, the same route to leave our airspace. So I don't see this project impacting it further than those two procedures that we designed for Fort Lauderdale Executive and Opelika.
Rick, thank you. Okay, we have a more general question. How were the waypoints established, and can east flow waypoints be located further east or south to minimize noise in southeast Fort Lauderdale? So part of that's general. What's the process where waypoints, how do we establish those? And then I guess there's a more specific one about southeast Fort Lauderdale.
I'll try to help with that, Michael. When we're designing these procedures, we actually try to stay as close to where the current track of the flights is today. And then there's also limitations of where these fixes can go depending on criteria for the program that designs them. And as far as going further east or south, if you want to maintain the degree separation between the two runways for two different departures, there was also limitations where we can go with that. Also, another thing that we consider was the interaction with arrivals, and where we can turn those departures. We didn't want to affect the efficiency of the airspace either.
All right, Luis, thanks. Any other comments?
Yeah, Michael, I think that was a good point that Luis made, that we tried to stay as close as we possibly could to the existing track data. And that was because part of our objective was to minimize the amount of change we introduced below 10,000 feet, because we know that does have a greater impact on people. There were some areas where we did need to make a couple of changes. We wanted to implement optimized profile descents to the greatest degree we possibly could. And, so there were a couple of connectivity challenges below 10,000 feet that we did make some minor adjustments in. So, Gary McMullen, could I get you to comment on those OPD procedures?
Sure. The optimized profile descent procedures help us with the airplane and how it flies today. We as pilots fly the airplane through what's called the flight management computer, the FMC. These procedures are held in a database inside that computer, and it gives us a little bit more opportunity to be able to fly them more accurately in 3 dimensions. We can stay on the lateral path better using our autopilot or flight director. It gives us or generates a vertical path that we can fly most of the time at idle thrust, which reduces noise. And the last component is speed. These new airplanes do not slow down and come down very well at the same time. And the stars through the programming and the flight management computer builds those descent points into the airplane to help us. And what I'm saying is the new computers, the new procedures help us fly the airplane better, quieter, safer, and more accurately.
All right, Gary, thanks for adding that. And thanks, Jim. Just doing a quick scan. Caesar, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add to everything that Gary was saying, and it's come up a couple of times before. Basically, in Fort Lauderdale, we were flying still hand flying off the runway on a heading and an altitude, and then eventually being given the ability to get back on a on an RNAV or a satellite-based path. We're going to be flying this aircraft totally different off of Fort Lauderdale now, as has been said a couple of times in here. And I don't know that if people out in the audience fully understands that we're actually will be, like Gary said, we'll be programming the flight path in our flight management computer, and we will be flying that path from all the way from the runway throughout the entire procedure until we get to the high altitudes. This will actually be a much safer and definitely a more precise way of flying this. So those people at Harbor Beach and Weston and even the southeast part of Fort Lauderdale, you may not see as many airplanes as you do now, especially going out east over the ocean, because off the runway we'll be strictly on that flight path procedure.
Okay, Cesar, thanks for adding that. It seems like a good point to mention. Not only are these, we have that level of precision. You really painted a great picture with that. The level of precision in and out of the airport, but there's also an infrastructure that exists around the country. So this is about connecting the flights in and out of Florida airports as they fly up the East Coast to say the Northeast corridor, out to the west part of the US, or even out to the Caribbean. There's a whole infrastructure. So it's almost like taking your local roads onto the interstate highways, but doing that in the air. So anyway, just kind of sharing that, but I'll quit telling stories. Jim, it looks like you unmuted.
Yeah, you're singing my song now, because the entire Metroplex program is just part of a larger effort to modernize the National Airspace System, or the NAS, and the PBN, performance-based navigation procedures that we're talking about here in the Lauderdale area are an enabler of that. There are several other components that we implement around the nation. One of them is data communications is a coming thing where we'll be able to transmit clearances automatically between air traffic and the flight deck of the airplane. We've got air traffic automation updates or improvements that we are doing to the system that will enable that system to also transmit those clearances. Our thought for the future, our vision for the future, is that by having all of this data communications, including communicating with the flight dispatchers, at the airlines, that we will be able to project the trajectory of aircraft throughout the system, so we will know where you're going to be in the future, most often before you push back from the gate at the airport. So it's really an efficiency issue in updating the entire system across the country, including those on-ramps and off-ramps to these terminal airspace areas that we're working in right now.
All right, great. Thanks, Jim. All right, I'm going to keep moving. If I don't agree with how you're departing flights to the west, can I put in a formal comment on that, and how do I do that? So absolutely you can. The public comment period for the project is open until July 10th. And thanks, Lisa. I was just kind of second guessing that. But July 10th, you still have about a month to get those in. You're going to want to go to floridametroplexworkshops.com. The easiest way is to pick on one of the cities like you did when you came into the workshop today for Fort Lauderdale, for example. And that'll take you right to the homepage for the workshops. You can click on the comments tab and either submit a comment there, or you can get a mailing address or an email address. The FAA will take that in any of those formats up as long as the comment period's open. So we certainly encourage you to do that. Enter any of the comments that you want there, and those become part of the official record for the draft, or for the final environmental assessment. Okay, here's a question. There's already a commercial corridor along the west route from the airport. Why are you suggesting adding a waypoint dreads, which will only increase noise to residential areas in Fort Lauderdale and Plantation?
I'll help with that one, Michael. In order to continue the two-runway operation at Fort Lauderdale Airport, if you can show the board there, thank you. We are going to use the fixed dreads only for departures that are going to destinations to the north, northeast. The aircraft landing at destinations to the west and northwest, they will be using the other fixed Cs. And the point dreads is located on a point that is further south of where the 290 heading would take them, which is what we're using currently today, the 290 heading. The fixed dreads, the location of it was designed in coordination with Broward County Aviation, and we try to stay in the less populated area south of 595.
Okay, Luis, thank you. All right. The images showing the new east flow departure routes appear to narrow the area that aircraft will fly when compared to the fan-shaped historical routes. Is it reasonable to expect this to occur?
I can take that one, Michael. The short answer to that question is yes. The aircraft are going to be on the procedure, which is in darker shade of purple. These aircraft are going to use satellite-based technology and be more centralized on that procedure. Now, if you know, as a South Florida residents, we all know that in the summer we get some pretty heavy thunderstorms. So setting aside weather and safety, the intention is to use these procedures for the majority of the time. Now, when there is weather, you'll see there's a lightly pink shaded area, and that's where aircraft could potentially fly due to weather or for safety reasons.
Great, thanks, Rick. All right, I hear the word procedure used. Can you clarify what is a procedure? May come back to air traffic on that one.
Sure, I'll take that question again. So a procedure essentially is just a very precise and predictable path that aircraft will fly. We're moving from ground-based to satellite-based technology, and this gives us the ability to match the technology that exists with the newer aircraft today. So when an air traffic controller puts an aircraft on a procedure, both the pilot and the controller are going to know that that aircraft is going to be separated from other aircraft using other procedures in the airspace.
All right, Rick, great. All right, I'm trying to keep us moving through these. We've got another one here. Since not all jet aircraft will be capable of flying these procedures based on equipment performance or just not being required to have the information on board, what is the plan for these aircraft? Will they be on a vector? What will that vector be? Has this been studied? And again, I'm only interested in Fort Lauderdale West departures. That's
so. Michael,
Jim, I was going to say that.
I'd like to tackle that one to start off with. You know, NAS-wide, National Airspace System-wide, about 99% of the fleet is capable of flying these types of procedures. Now, there may be some aircraft that can't, or maybe there's a minimum equipment list or some issue that would prevent a pilot or an aircrew from accepting one of these. Most aircraft will be able to accept them, and I guess that's a two-parter. I see Mark Hopkins is on here from Delta. Mark, can you give us an idea of fleet-wide, what we're looking at for capability of flying these procedures? You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, yeah, I just got the mute, took a second. You know, from our perspective, the capability is improving, Jim. We've retired a large number of our older aircraft through the current crisis, MD-88s and MD-90s, and most of the aircraft we have in the fleet today will be able to fly these procedures.
Okay, but if we don't, if we're not able to, then I guess air traffic, Luis or Ricardo, what do you guys do with them if they can't fly one of these?
So if they're not going to be on the RNAV, they're going to use either radar vectors or non-conventional SIDs. either the one that is currently published, or we are actually designing non-conventional SIDs to match the new RNAV departures.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you. So we're nearing the end of the workshop. We have just a few more questions. Here's one. I have heard the noise has been measured much higher. How do you explain the discrepancies between the readings someone may get with a measurement tool versus what you model? Why do you model versus measure? Wouldn't it be more accurate to measure? Lisa?
I can try to give it a shot. There's actually potential for greater fidelity and geographic scale in modeling versus measuring, which is helpful in reviewing the potential impacts of bigger type airspace projects like a Metroplex. And it gives us really the ability to look across multiple years. Take for instance, like what's happening right now with the COVID-19. If we looked at just this point in time right now and try to do our analysis, it just wouldn't work. It doesn't give us an accurate picture, So I put up a slide, and this slide is not, of course, for the Florida area, but it's in San Francisco, and it kind of gives you a good depiction of, if we take monitors and measure the noise as opposed to modeling that that noise across the entire study area. It would be it would take a lot of noise monitors to go out, and if you see on this graphic, it shows about 30 noise monitors in this area, as opposed to 9,000 and over 9,000 receptors in this area, the same information, but one of them is taking measurements of a single point in time, or and modeling. And with model, we can have a greater potential of encompassing all of what's happening in real time out there. So it gives you a good depiction of the balance between the two, why we don't measure using monitors, and we have to use a model to account for those. Modeling just allows us to capture all the operations from aircraft, and it is spread out over an average annual day basis, and that's the crux of it. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, I think this may be our last question. You refer us to the environmental report for info. It would be more useful to give, maybe this is a comment, but would be more useful to give page number out of the hundreds of pages, or even saying go to section 4 or 5. A specific page would be helpful. So I'll just say that's a good suggestion. We appreciate the feedback on that, and we'll take that into account. I don't know if anybody else wants to offer anything, but certainly it's a large document, and we acknowledge that. It does have some search capabilities if that's helpful. So if there's a word that you're looking for, you can find that in the various versions. But Lisa or anybody else, if you want to add to that.
I agree. It's a large document. There's a lot of information there, and it can be a little overwhelming. Good suggestion using the search tool there on that document. If you open it in, I guess, I don't know what's the format, but usually there's a search tool there that you can type in keywords if you're looking for something specific, and kind of zoom through the document and hone in on the specific area. Most of the information that people are interested in is the environmental consequences section. Really gives you a good summary of our the impacts associated with this document. And that's generally, that is in chapter 5 of the document. So if you go to section 5 and then you can type in the keyword that you're looking for, it's a quick search to get you where you need to go. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Jim.
Yeah, oh, you're absolutely, this question is spot on, because it's a challenge for us when we search for some things in there too. It's about a 5,000 page document. I downloaded a copy today, coincidentally, and to search for something in it. And I think it was 126 megabytes, somewhere in there. It is a PDF document, so you can use the PDF search function in there. But generally, if you know what you're looking for in the appendices or using the index, you can narrow it down to the area that you want to get to.
And if I'm not mistaken, if you open it in your PDF reader or whatever device you're using, if you go to the table of contents or whatever, you can search on a topic you're looking for, and if you click there, it generally will take you directly to that section of the document, if that helps as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you both. So that brings us to the end of the workshop. I want to thank you for participating and for asking good questions. I hope the answers you heard were informative. I want to thank our specialists for providing their expertise, and our entire FAA communications team and all of the others who supported this workshop in the background. I also want to acknowledge our industry representatives, airlines, pilots, and the airport from Fort Lauderdale International Airport, who joined us this afternoon to contribute their perspective in the discussion. So thank you all. As a reminder, your questions today are not part of the legal record for the draft environmental assessment. So if you want to comment for the record, please go to the comments tab on this website, FloridaMetroplexWorkshops.com. You can also email us or send us a written comment, and those addresses are also on the comments tab on this website. I'll remind everyone the comment period is open until July 10th of 2020, and after the comment period closes, the FAA will consider and review all substantive comments received during the comment period. The agency expects to issue an environmental determination in September 2020. I know we mentioned it earlier, but the workshop is being recorded and it will be available for playback on the website tomorrow. Again, FloridaMetroplexWorkshops.com. Click on the Fort Lauderdale link. We'll also host another live workshop for Fort Lauderdale tomorrow, Wednesday, June 10th at 3 p.m., as well as Thursday, June 11th at 6 p.m. So if any of you have follow-up questions, or if you have friends or family, neighbors that you want to have be a part of the workshop, please let them know. Again, they can register at FloridaMetroplexWorkshops.com. That concludes our workshop for today, and I want to thank you again for joining us.